Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Mission Career Transition podcast. On this episode, our guest is Mike Abrams, the founder and president of FourBlock, that provides amazing services to transitioning service members. He himself is a reservist in the Marine Corps, and he has a lot to say about how to execute your transition and the services that his company provides to help that process, not only helping transitioning service members, but also there's a special program that helps spouses. I learned a lot from this episode. If you want to learn more about what's available to you to help you with your transition, stay tuned. Mike Abrams, welcome to the podcast.
Chris, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Hey, nice to have you.
Yeah, I got a list of questions. It's always great talking to a fellow leatherneck. We might be using lingo that Sis doesn't understand, so she can call us out when we get there. But to start off, let's let some of the listeners know who you are and where you're from. First, where'd you grow up?
Grew up in upstate New York, a little town called Brunswick, outside of the city of Troy. Out in the country, beautiful little area there. Everyone says, Alexander, you're from New York. I mean, you tell someone you're from New York, they automatically think the city. They don't necessarily think cornfields and, manure, but that's basically where I grew up.
Yeah, it's a pretty area. I've actually made it out there while I was on recruiting duty too. I think it was like a district conference or something like that.
Okay.
How is it, Mike? How is it that you joined the Marine Corps? What's that story like?
So I actually joined after 9/11. So I was going to school at SUNY Cortland, so just south of Syracuse. I was a junior. And I guess I've always been interested in the military. My dad was in Vietnam, and he actually ended up going to Iraq with the Army National Guard. My first teddy bear was an Army teddy bear, and I think I was General Patton for Halloween, until I was like 12 years old or something. So I guess it was planted, in my brain. And then when 9/11 happened, I thought, this was my opportunity to carry on that family tradition. My dad served, both my grandparents, and, I would later learn, like even farther back, had family history. So the next day on September 12th, I walked down my hill, Clayton Avenue in Cortland, and started talking to a couple of recruiters. And I ended up with the Marine Corps because previously to that, I talked to my dad about potentially joining, and he said, well, when you're ready, let me know, I can get you situated and help you out and, make sure you're all set. But I just wanted to do it all on my own. Had he, who knows, had he taken that a different approach, and maybe I would have joined the Army, but the Marine recruiter was there that day. So was the Navy recruiter. And I talked to the both of them and ended up going Marine Corps.
That's great. And you served in the active component for a while, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were a cannon cocker, an artilleryman, artillery
That's correct.
officer.
So I did 8 years active duty, was an artilleryman, deployed with 3-3 as a forward observer, and then I was on recruiting duty. I don't know if you did a B billet as a captain on recruiting duty. Usually you do before you're an RSCO, right?
I didn't even know what RSCO stood for until somebody said congratulations. And the people that said congratulations had no idea what they were congratulating me about.
Oh, that's great.
So,
that's
yeah.
Great. Wow. So you had no recruiting experience before you were an RSCO, huh?
No, none.
Wow.
I've been in random duty locations. It's really weird because I've stayed in, and I don't know. Now that my peer group is somewhat thinned out, there was a period of time where I really didn't know anybody in the engineer community because I was assigned to like air stations and then EWS and then going to Okinawa and Iwakuni. It was a great, I don't regret it, but yeah, it was getting the orders to recruiting duty was a bit of a surprise. So,
yeah. Well, congrats.
Yeah, you survived too. Congratulations. You're doing all right.
So it wasn't that bad for me.
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy on anybody.
Yeah.
So you went from the active component to the reserves, and a lot of times we talk about transitions from going from active component and then just getting out of the military. But I'm sure it's a transition like any other. in some ways, and then there are some aspects that I'm sure are different. What was your calculus of decision making when you decided to get out of the active component and join the reserves, and what was that process like?
Um, well, it's a great question. Um, so I was also in New York City. There is a Marine Corps Mafia in New York City. You can't walk a block in uniform without somebody saying, "Hey, Devil Dog, what are you doing here?" And after your conversation, they give you your business card and they say, "Hey, what are you doing when you get out? Maybe you want to come work for me." So there was just a lot of that pull from that Marine Corps community who are now folks in the business world or working on Wall Street or whatever. So it is the best place to transition out. You've got so much support and so many people there who are willing to talk to you and help you out. I was kind of a, captain with a chip on my shoulder and a little disgruntled being on recruiting duty. And, I was probably made a little bit of a rash decision to get out. But it ended up working out. You get that pull, being there. I ended up going back to business school at NYU, and which is what led me to starting FourBlock there. It was a tough decision. And there was a lieutenant colonel active duty who was at the public affairs office there in New York, a guy named Neil Murphy. Awesome Marine, just awesome dude. And when I told him I was getting out, he was like, "Why are you getting out?" He's like, "Well, at least stay in the reserves and come work for me." And I was like, he's like, "Hey, at least you'll have a job. You can go back to school, kind of part-time, you can stay in it." And that was the best advice I got at that time, because it allowed me to stay in. I had a part-time job, and then, I was able to continue in the reserves. But if it wasn't for him, I probably would have got fully out. So yeah, that's basically the story.
So I'm guessing you used your GI Bill in order to go to business school?
Correct. So I did the GI Bill. Still got about 14 months left, which is great. So transfer that to the kids.
Nice.
And hopefully that'll save me some money down the road.
Yeah. One of the things that's a little bit daunting to me, although I'm too long in the tooth to go right into the reserve component, but the thing that was always daunting to me was trying to balance the civilian professional life and the reserve drill requirement life with employers. And I don't know, it just seems like something that's pretty complicated. What was that like for you, as going from the active component to the reserves and having to manage that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be tough. General Bellin calls it the irrational call to service. And you've got people who are, like you said, full-time jobs. They got families, they're doing things in the community, and then they got all this other time that they got to devote to the reserves. And, the biggest lie ever told is 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, so it's a lot more time than that, especially if you're in a leadership role. It could definitely feel like a full-time job. I was lucky. Well, I guess my first couple jobs out of the military after business schools, I worked for CNBC. So I was on the breaking news desk. So whenever there's breaking news, you saw the back of my head and 4 screens in front of me. And then I worked for a consulting firm, and it was tough kind of managing that. And even just kind of talking to your employer about what it is that you're doing. And I remember one of my managers at one point at the consulting firm, I come in after a long week. I had to take a couple of days off, and it was like a 4-day drill. And I come back the following Monday, and she goes, "Well, how was your camping trip?" And it was kind of like this condescending little comment, and it was, trying to be funny. It was just well, it wasn't really a camping trip. I mean, here's what we did. Kind of, I had to explain it to her, and she was like, "Oh, wow." But and I remember interviewing at another company as I was transitioning, and the guy actually told me, he goes, "I'm not going to hire you until you get out of the reserves." He's like, "I want to know that your loyalty is to me and to me only." And and that was probably illegal for him to say, but
Yeah.
I didn't go to work there. And then after that, I started FourBlock, so it's I have a lot more flexibility, being able to do reserve stuff and and work. There's been a couple instances where I've been activated right away, and the team has been able to kind of pick up the slack for me over the course of a couple months or whatever, and allow me to take care of whatever emergency it was. So FourBlock stuff has been great and given me that flexibility.
That's great. And I know we both agree, reservists play a huge role the reserve component. So it's certainly not trying to dissuade anybody from doing it, particularly if they're a captain thinking about going into the reserve component. But certainly, it sounds like this is just another challenge you kind of have to manage.
It's been very rewarding for me. I've been very lucky. I've looked at it as another challenge and as a way for me to, um, just hone my leadership abilities and get connected to more people. And, it's just a nice thing to do, kind of outside your family and work life. I'm with I'll put a plug in for the unit I'm in with right now. It's called the Marine Innovation Unit. So a new unit, it took the place of the C-130 squadron that was in Newburgh, New York. And, I think this is brilliant. So the Marine Corps basically said, we want to put a unit together, a company-sized unit of Marines who have skills and experiences that are not organic to the Marine Corps. So people who work, for Google or Apple doing coding, people who work for Amazon doing drone technology, FedEx, experts in logistics, additive manufacturing. We've got PhDs in the reserves. So, we've got like so much talent in the Marine Corps reserves, and they've brought that talent together into one unit. And then we do basically consulting gigs with active component units to help accelerate innovation and do problem solving for them. So it's pretty incredible to see, all the things that are happening across the Marine Corps. And we've got these pockets of like MIUers all over the place, like helping with at the general officer and colonel level with different problem sets that they're working on across the Pacific or new weaponry or whatever. It's incredible to see the Marine Corps being able to leverage that reserve talent and infusing it into the active component.
Yeah, that's great. I think I have very limited exposure with innovation initiatives on the active component, and sometimes we have like junior Marines that come up with like really great ideas, but sometimes it's also recognizing we kind of are grown up in this different type of ecosystem. And I've always been amazed with some of the capability that reservists bring to the table. I didn't even know the reserve component was involved in Marine Corps innovation like that. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, let's get into a little bit about what you do right now, Mike. the founder and the president of FourBlock. To start off, if you could share with us, what's the genesis story of FourBlock?
Sure. So as an OSO and officer selection officer in New York City, I got to go to a lot of black tie military events in my uniform. And I had the honor of escorting an Iwo Jima survivor, is what he called himself, a guy named Corporal Alan Striffler, on one of the first waves into Iwo Jima. And he's got an incredible story. And he was on a couple other landings in the Pacific. So I would pick up him and oftentimes his wife at Grand Central Station. They'd be in my dress blues, and they'd be in a tux or whatever, and we'd take them to different events. So I got to develop a really good relationship with him. And one night, we were just BSing a bit, and he confided in me basically that when he came back from World War II, he had post-traumatic stress, and it wasn't called that back then. But knowing what he knew at the time, he was exhibiting a lot of those symptoms. And he said one morning his uncle came and dragged his hungover butt out of bed one morning and got him a job at, I think it was Standard Oil in Stamford, Connecticut. He was sitting next to a Army veteran who served in Normandy, and they were just doing like punching out invoices. And they became fast friends. Then shortly thereafter met his wife, and sort of the rest was history. He had a beautiful family and a wonderful, very successful business career. But he looked at me that night and he pointed at me and he said, "Mike, that job saved my life because it gave me meaning and purpose again." So that is what got the wheels turning with respect to what do veterans, in my opinion, need the most when they transition. And that's, finding meaning and purpose in a career as quickly as possible. And if you did that, maybe they wouldn't, turn to alcohol or drugs or, go down a dark path there. So that's how it got me thinking about it. And then when I went back to school, I was taking an entrepreneurship class and had to come up with a business plan, business idea or whatever. So I just thought of this, basically a nonprofit that would help better connect and bridge the gap between employers and transitioning veterans, focusing on those corporals and sergeants who were coming out, going back to school for a 4-year degree. So that's basically how it got started, just kind of the thought process behind it.
Yeah, and that was shortly around the time that that was around the time that you transitioned into the reserve component. So it's been going strong for almost 14 years.
Going
So that,
strong for, well, it started out not so strong, so it's,
yeah,
when I first started it,
fair.
you know, I had a friend who worked at NBC and a friend who worked at Bloomberg, and I called them up, and they were both veterans. And I said, hey, if I found a couple student veterans, would you hire them, for an internship? They were like, yeah, sure, absolutely. So I went to a bunch of the CUNY schools in Columbia and Fordham, and I said, hey, I'm a veteran. I'm representing, Bloomberg and NBC. They're looking to hire some interns. Can you put the word out? And I think we got 4 people into NBC and 1 person into Bloomberg. And I think that was the fall of like 2009. And, but then I looked at that and I said, well, I'm kind of acting like a headhunter. I mean, that's not really that innovative. So let's turn it around. Let's start with a group of veterans. Let's take them to different companies. Let's help them figure out where it is they want to go. And then let's build those pathways to those companies. So that was the first cohort in 2010. We had a group of 16 veterans that I worked with over the course of a year, and we took them to different companies, and they got to meet the people who worked there, learn about the company, and it was really relationship based. It was helping them meet the people, build relationships with them, do follow-on conversations, and it was through those relationships where, the companies would be more comfortable bringing people in, and the veterans would be more comfortable figuring out what it is that they actually wanted to do. And that first class, 15 of the 16 got internships. The one who didn't wanted to be a fireman, so he took the FDNY test and was just waiting on that. And when, the program is at the core has been the same ever since. We've gotten a lot better with just the curriculum and scaling it, and some of the support infrastructure around it. But at its core, it really hasn't changed since that first cohort.
Okay, great. So that was kind of how it started. So if you could give us an overview of kind of the different programs tailored towards transitioning service members that FourBlock currently provides.
Sure.
It sounds like you kind of started with a version of the Career Readiness program, but maybe you could start by telling us about that program specifically.
Yep, absolutely. So that's you're exactly right. That was the Career Readiness program, the Veteran Career Readiness program. So we've got 20 plus programs going across the country right now, representing 30 locations. We've got a bunch of virtual programs, sprinkled in throughout there. We'll work with about 11 to 1,200 veterans this year. And the program structure is really the same that I just described. It's 10 to 11 week program. Every week we take a group of veterans, anywhere from really 30 to 40, to a different company. It's not for the whole week. It's just one night. So it's a Wednesday night from 6 to 8 p.m. We take them to ABC company, and then the next week XYZ company, and it's a couple hours long. We have a curriculum that we teach in conjunction with this. The curriculum has 2 sides. The first side is more of the kind of, what do I want to do next with my life? What are my strengths and weaknesses? Where do I see myself 10 years from now, type of stuff. And then we get into more of the technical competencies of a career search, like resume writing, interview skills. How do you talk about your military experiences? How do you talk about your value? How do you negotiate an offer? Things like that. And then we work with everybody one-on-one to make sure that they're successful, make sure they land, where it is that they want to land, whether it's at the company or the industry. We joke that it's the mafia. There's no getting out. Once you're part of our program and you succeed, we're going to, continue to make sure that you're successful. And, over the years, a lot of folks have come back and said, hey, I'm ready for my next thing. I've been here for 4 years. How do I get promoted? I'm actually interested in going to this company. Like, do you know anybody there? So we're starting to, serve the alumni community now, and alumni are now coming back to teach and coach and mentor and bring the next, support the next group of veterans, which is awesome. So a lot of our full-time staff, a lot of our instructors, the companies who host are all former FourBlock alumni who've been through the program, which is pretty cool. We started a spouse program a couple years ago as well. So the story behind that one is, a few years ago, it started to become very clear that spouses were having significant issues with employment, and it started to some of these other organizations, you hear about it in the news, what the spouse unemployment rate is and stuff. So we started really thinking through, how do we serve this community, whether or not we just welcome them into the veteran career readiness program, or, we were kind of going back and forth. And then I heard a spouse say on a panel a couple years ago, "Don't and me." She said, "Just because I am a spouse doesn't mean you can just throw me into a program designed for veterans and expect me to get anything out of it. Like, I deserve my own unique support structure." And that really hit me like than a veteran transitioning. And one of our board members, Lindsay Pollock, was acquaintances with another woman who ran this program that helped onboard women who had left the workforce, typically to have a child, or for whoever wanted to do a career pivot. And they had been working actually with spouses for a while. Just sort of spouses found their program, and they just started taking it. So we talked, and we developed a program specifically for military spouses, where they take them through their tailored curriculum in their process, and then we take our employer base that we've built with our veteran career readiness program, and we sort of connect them with the career opportunities and the people that we know. So it's a really nice collaboration. They've got that expertise and the experience with that demographic, and we've got the employer base. So it's been super successful. We're doubling the size of it this year. So we'll work with close to 150 spouses this year, twice as much as we did last year. Another program that we don't do anymore is our Wounded Warrior program. So when we first started, I got connected to actually one of our founding board members, a guy named Chris Vasilio. He was the CEO of Radius Travel, the chief operating officer for Travelocity, worked for American Airlines a long time. His son joined the Marine Corps and had PTSD and TBI when he came back and struggled. So he got connected to Walter Reed in his office, and where he lived actually was very close to Walter Reed Hospital there in Bethesda. And he started spending more and more time there, just mentoring and working with some of the wounded warriors. So we sort of folded it into our FourBlock programming, and he ended up retiring as the CEO, and he was our basically a full-time staff member with the Marine Corps Wounded Warrior Regiment at Walter Reed. And he worked with both the Marines and the sailors these are like catastrophically wounded, double, triple amputee, had multiple problems. So it was very much one-on-one kind of, how can we support you in transitioning out? And just to give one quick example, he was working with a gunnery sergeant, EOD tech, double amputee above the knee, who got really into sled hockey, and he wanted to try to make the Paralympic team. And through FourBlock, we were connected with the insurance industry in New York, and they wanted to raise some money for us through this like hockey tournament that they did every year. That was just a bunch of guys who got together to play hockey in the insurance industry, and they said, "Well, let's try to raise money because they've got like 100 guys playing." So it got connected to us, and I said, "Wow, we've got this gunny who is basically playing hockey, but in a sled, Paralympics. Like, let's raise money for him and for his training." And I think this will be the 10th year, and we've raised this year. We'll raise over $1 million for him, and he's a 2-time gold medalist. So he made the Olympic team. We basically paid for his his training and supported him, and so that's just one example of one of the things that we've done there at Walter Reed.
Wow.
Jeez.
That's pretty amazing.
Well, he's amazing. Yeah, we just kind of connected the dots on raising some money, but you should have him on your podcast. I'll make the introduction for it. He's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll reach out to him. I know you also have one other program. It's the Find Your Calling online course.
Oh yeah. So we, so a number of years ago, through a collaboration with Columbia University and T-Mobile, we created this self-paced curriculum that basically follows sort of that one side of our curriculum around kind of what do you want to do next in your life, what your skills are, and kind of where do you see yourself 10 years from now. And what was cool is that we reached out to some experts like Sebastian Junger and Simon Sinek and Sheena Alangar, folks who are just experts in some of these things. And they agreed to come and get videoed and sort of basically give a class online, which was awesome. So we've got some pretty cool people who are part of this in just dropping some nuggets of wisdom throughout the course there. But we needed something. Our career readiness program, it's very intensive. you're talking 5 to 10 hours a week. You got to show up in a suit and tie, or, there's some work, a lot of reading involved and a lot of follow up and stuff. And some people just don't have the time to do all that. And they could just benefit from the curriculum that we have. And that was sort of the thought behind the online courses. Let's produce something where folks can just do it on their own, go through everything, benefit from it. I think we've had close to 5,000 people take that, over the last number of years, which is pretty cool. And then actually we have one more program that we're starting to. It's called the Career Pathway Event. So because we have so many alumni, we are taking once a month now, focusing on a specific career path, whether that's cybersecurity, supply chain management, finance, whatever. And we have a little panel discussion. It's a live virtual event, so everybody's on Zoom. We have a little panel discussion with our alumni who talk about that specific career path, and then we have 20 or 25 employers, employers represented typically by our alumni who are in breakout rooms. And then veterans can come in, listen to the panel discussion, and then go meet the different alumni and go get connected to the different companies. This is for everybody, all veterans, all spouses. We started doing these late last year, and we've had some pretty good success with that as well. So we're going to continue that.
Oh, that's great. Just a deep dive into different career paths. I mean, so many times I'm just so unaware of all the different opportunities that are out there. And sometimes it's hard to gain information, particularly as somebody who's getting ready to transition after a 20-year career. And, I still have to put food on the table. So
Right.
I might want to do a pivot, but I don't know what I can actually use my current strengths and pivot to, and not necessarily start from the bottom, but maybe start at a place where I can meet the needs of my family, but still pursue something that's fundamentally different yet fulfilling.
Right.
And the deep dive in the career paths, that sounds like a great idea. Question regarding the Career Readiness program and maybe some of the other programs. So being strategic about somebody's transition, at what point in time should a transitioning service member kind of look towards trying to register for those programs? Is it about a year out, 6 months out? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I would say a year out. 6 months out, you're starting to get, you start looking at leave, and sometimes it takes 6 months to get hired. At some of these companies. So you really got to start looking at it a year out and taking some of these programs. Some people take it 18 months out. If you're 18 months out and for sure you're transitioning out, then I would absolutely start connecting with people, start having some conversations, and then a year out, begin taking some of these programs.
Oh, that's great. So one of the questions I'll ask you, and kind of maybe you could give the final pitch for FourBlock. One of the challenges that I have, and maybe others feel the same way, is that there are so many great services offered by people and organizations that just want to help veterans and want to help transitioning service members. Is there a certain niche that FourBlock fills, or maybe the reason what makes FourBlock different from some of those other organizations?
Sure. It's a great question. There are a lot of organizations out there that are doing outstanding things, really top-notch organizations. Some out there that aren't as good, so you just got to be careful, kind of, where, do your research, always get a reference from someone. Unfortunately, there are some companies and folks out there who take advantage of the community. So you just, they muddy the waters a bit. So you just got to be careful. For us, we're basically a community. And that's what we really try to stress with our folks is that, we've got a resume class. We're going to introduce you to some companies. You can go anywhere and get a resume class. There's nothing in particularly special about, some of our content and things like that. And you can go on LinkedIn and you can get connected to different companies and things. What I think we offer is that we're a community of really like-minded veterans and spouses who want to achieve excellence in our careers and in our families. And you're surrounding yourself with people like that who are going to kind of push you and help you to make you better. One of the things that we tell our classes is that, as you go through the program, you're going to meet a ton of people in the business world, and definitely get their contact information, get with them on LinkedIn, reach out to them, but stay in touch with the folks who are going through the program with you, because you're going to get more opportunities from staying in touch with your peers than you are from staying in touch with someone who you meet at this XYZ company. And we are starting to see a lot more of sort of alumni getting in touch with alumni, and alumni giving each other opportunities, and alumni hiring alumni. So it's just that it's the community and the camaraderie and the sort of the culture that we've created, that when you come here, you're here to achieve excellence in your transition and in your civilian career. And we can help you do that in a variety of different ways. It's that attitude and that culture that I think is really what makes us more special than, some of the other organizations that do incredible work, and they're focused on, different niches. But that's sort of what I think differentiates us a little bit.
Oh, that's great. Sis, you got any questions?
Well, did you ever imagine that this was going to grow as big as it is now?
Not really. I just did it in New York for 4 years until someone basically said, "Hey, we really like what you're doing. Can we give you some money to expand it to another city?" And I was like, "Sure." And it just sort of kind of grew from there a bit. I was doing it because I got so much more out of it than I think the veterans did. I mean, it was very therapeutic for me to I kind of had regrets for getting off active duty, and, I wasn't sure if that was the right decision. And doing this made me feel that I was still part of the military, and I was taking care of corporals and sergeants getting out. And I got so much more out of it than I think people got out of it from going through the program. So it's been great for me. Some people say "Wow, this is huge, and you guys are blowing up." I'm like, not really. I mean, we've been doing this for 15 years, and it's sort of been a slow growth. Maybe you're just hearing about it, which is awesome. But it's been great. It's been difficult at times, but it's also been very, very rewarding.
I'm curious, when you approach companies to be part of this career readiness program, what is your pitch? How do you approach those companies, and what is it that you tell them?
Sure. So a lot of it is through our alumni, or it's through a veteran connection. So it's usually some sort of warm conversation, to start. It's a mutual friend or alumni who's been through, who already sort of knows who we are and wants to bring us in. But when we sit down and we start talking to the leadership, we basically ask them a question. It's just, what do you want to gain out of hiring veterans or being in the veteran space? Because there's some companies who partner with us, who want to hire talent, who look at us, who are like, "Hey, we got a problem. We want to bring in veteran talent. We're not sure how to reach them," or we're bringing in a lot of veterans and they're not staying at our company very long and they're leaving. So they've got some issue with hiring and retaining veterans, and they look at us as an opportunity to solve that problem. There's some companies who already do a really good job of hiring veterans, and they don't care about hiring any of our veterans. It's sort of gravy if they do. But what they care about is we've created a really good platform for their employees to give back to the community in a meaningful way. So you've got a lot of these veteran employee resource groups who will go for a run, or, they used to get together on a Saturday and put together care packages, but they're looking for something more sort of sustainable, long-term, getting more people involved. So they really like us as an opportunity to really engage their veteran employee resource group to come and teach and coach and mentor, in a variety of different locations. There's a couple companies that look at us as for their skills-based volunteering. So they'll take a up and coming leader, and they'll say, "Let's plug him into FourBlock. We need to get this person in front of people. Get them experience teaching, mentoring, doing public speaking. So we're going to start putting them into the FourBlock program and having them start teaching classes and get in front of veterans, get in front of a group of people." So there's some who actually look at us like, "Hey, we've got these 10 people who we think are on the track for leadership. So we want them to come in and teach some of your classes and learn how to mentor somebody." And there's a few who want to reach the veteran market for, they want to sell something, or they want to have some sort of brand recognition as being friendly in the military space. They all sort of want that to some degree, and there's been a few who have straight up said, our reputation in the veteran community is terrible. We're aligning ourselves with really respectable organizations. We'd love to support yours as a like general awareness type of thing. And we're kind of like, you got to be very, very careful with that approach and those types of partnerships. But those are sort of the different ways. And we have, examples on how we've partnered with companies, across, all those ways.
Well, I'm sure your passion really goes through when you talk to them. I don't see how it could be very difficult for somebody who comes in with a question mark, leaving with an exclamation and knowing that they really want to work with you. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Finding win-win-win scenarios. I'm sure it has its, like you alluded to, it's got its nuances.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end here. I would like to ask you the same question I ask all the guests that come on the podcast. If there were, and you have such a depth of experience specifically on military transition, I usually ask if there are 2 or 3 things you want listeners to remember as they prepare for their own transition. What are they? But you might have 3 or 4, and I'm more than willing to hear them. So, sure. Mike, it's over to you.
No, it's a great question. We get asked it all the time. I would say the answer differs a little bit just based on where they are in their transition and sort of their seniority or whatever. But I would say, generally speaking, one is, especially if you're retiring and you have a family, you need to talk to your spouse. You need to consider your children, figure out sort of how you're going to support them from a time perspective, not necessarily from a financial perspective, but do you want to be home every day at 4? Your wife or your spouse has followed you around for the last 20 years or 10 years. Is it her turn now to have the be priority in her career? Because folks will say, hey, I need to make all the money, but my spouse has a career and I need to be home by 3:00 every day. It's like, well, it's going to be tough to make $250,000 a year, working, being home every day at 3:00, so like you really manage expectations around what are your priorities, particularly around your family, where you want to live. Are you going to be in a location for a certain number of time, years so that your kids can finish high school? All those things are major, major impacts into where you're going to start looking for employers or, what career path you ultimately want to choose. So we, particularly for the more senior folks, we talk a little bit about what that looks like for them. And how that restricts or enables them to, look outside of where they currently are, where they want to go or whatever. And then the next thing would be keep an open mind. Obviously, everyone's got our own biases and our perceptions of different companies and different types of careers. It happens all the time in our program where somebody won't want to come to a weekly class because they have no interest in working at that company. But then we say, get your butt there. And they leave there with like, oh my God, I have an interview next week and I never thought this company was like this. It happens regularly. So expand your horizons, keep an open mind as to what's out there. Don't say no to anybody. Talk to everybody you possibly can. And really learn what are the different opportunities. And then I would say the third piece is really get an idea of what the day-to-day is. So you may fall in love with a company or a career path or a job. But if you don't really know what the day-to-day is like, you may go start work and be like, man, this is not what I thought this was going to be. So once you sort of begin to narrow it down, really get an idea, try to spend a day with somebody or try to ask some really specific questions around like, hey, it's Monday at 9. Are you in the office right now? What do you do on Monday morning? What is it that you actually do on a day-to-day? And that will also help you really figure out whether or not that's something that you want to do every day.
It sounds so elementary. I could imagine this recruit. Yeah. I'd imagine this recruit would not ask those questions. And then that's great advice. I appreciate it, Mike.
Well, I'll just mention one story. It kind of, I just remembered it here that I think would be relevant to this. We had someone on our team who was a veteran transition a long time ago, and he was going on a lot of different interviews. And he came back home and he told his wife about the people he met at the interview and how it went. And she said, well, I guess that's where you're going to work, huh? And he goes, well, what makes you think that? And she said, well, this is the first time you came back from an interview and you talked about the people that you had met. And it kind of hit him like, yeah, I mean, these were sort of my people. Like I felt really comfortable being around them. I feel like I could be part of this team. And that was where he went to go work, so sometimes it's also look at the culture, look at the people who you're going to be around. Don't worry so much about what the role is. Once you're there, you can figure it out just like you did in the military.
Oh, all right. That's a great point. So Mike, how do people learn more about FourBlock or get in touch with you if they have additional questions?
Sure. So we've got our website, fourblock.org, FOUR, fourblock.org. We've got a podcast that we do, it's called the FourBlock podcast. So it's, we do that every couple of weeks or so. And, you could put my contact information, my email in there, or my LinkedIn as well. Feel free to connect with me, and we're here to help.
All right. Hey, I appreciate it. Mike, I would have to say, I look at your portfolio of work and everything that you've done, and what's amazing is the impact that you've made on service members and on the Marine Corps, and you're doing it, and you provide such an interesting and fresh perspective on the transition process, not only because of what you do to help transitioning service members, but also the fact that you have one foot in the reserve component and one foot in the private world, all focusing on helping everybody that's either wearing a uniform or has worn a uniform. So Mike, thank you so much for what you do. I really appreciate it, and coming on the podcast.
No, absolutely. It was my pleasure, Chris, Alexandra. Thanks for having me on. And it was great to be here.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. I'll be in touch.
Okay, great.
And Mike Abrams has left the virtual studio. Sis.
Bye, Mike.
Bye, Mike.
Bye, Mike.
Bye, Mike. What's going on? What do you think?
I mean,
by the way, you always say that.
I do.
I know I've got my own ticks too.
I do. I'll work on that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's what
feedback,
brothers are for.
Always well received. Thank you. So, no, I'm just kidding. I think it's really great to see somebody who came up with an idea from a connection that he had with someone, and it's now just turned into this. I mean, he likes to say it's not as big as people think, but this is a really big program. And there was something that he said. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the fact that they really focus on spouses as well, because it never really hits me as hard to understand what spouses go through, and the fact that there is a lot of traveling, there is a lot of putting what you need to the side, taking care of, if you have kids, the home, and then being able to be given the option to ask the question, what is it that you want now? And I think that that's really great that they offer that for families, and it builds a stronger bond, I think, in partnerships. So that was the first takeaway that I got. And then the other one that I really like is that we've heard this before, that, be open to opportunities, don't say no. And the example that he gave about someone who just didn't want to show up because they didn't think that they liked the company, but then it just turns around that they have an interview for something that sounds really great. I mean, it's the same thing, because for me, it was, 16 years in hospitality, working from 2 p.m. to 2 a.m., sometimes 6 days a week. Sometimes I'm working 16-hour days. And then all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, 2 days later, after leaving one job, I'm working Monday at an office in a corporate building at 9 a.m. in front of a computer, and I'm not talking to anyone. So it was this huge, vast difference of what I was normally doing. But if I wasn't open to the opportunity, I probably would have said absolutely not.
Yeah, I think it's also a recognition that you're not really going to be successful unless you're also successful at home. I mean, we know that from our deployments. Like, how are you ever going to achieve peak performance in anything if other parts of your life are just absolute chaos? And so I think, it's a very creating a spouse program is a far more holistic view on what it means to actually support a veteran. You can't support the veteran unless there's a support network, and that support network is also healthy to include the family.
Mm-hmm.
One of my takeaways, and I was talking about Mike, I was talking to Mike about this separately, but his program, specifically the career readiness program through FourBlock, may be a great substitute for the SkillBridge program. We know that the branches of service are stressed out on recruitment, and they're working hard and they're getting after it. And also that the SkillBridge program was designed for junior enlisted, and to provide them an opportunity to transition. So if you're like a senior enlisted or a senior officer and you're transitioning, I think a lot of the services are starting to look really hard at, how much can we afford to have somebody actually not in the seat doing the job, particularly when, we have to staff these organizations and these units. And so I'm looking at the program that FourBlock offers, and I think it may be the right program as a substitute for SkillBridge, depending on, your time in service, what your branch's service policies are. And then just like, when is the right time for you to transition? So I'm not saying that the SkillBridge program, you shouldn't look into it. Everybody should look into it. You should look into all the options. I think FourBlock is an incredible service and something that every transitioning service member should also look into. And then we'll make sure that FourBlock, the URL is on the episode notes. So if you like what you heard and you're interested in FourBlock, just take a look at the episode notes. We'll provide all the links so you can learn more information about how to apply and some of the details regarding the different programs. And that's it. That's it. That's a wrap. Well, not quite a wrap, because if you like what you heard, I'm going to ask you, I just give me 5 stars. Give us 5 stars. The only reason why I'm asking for 5 stars, if you're listening to Apple or you're listening to Spotify and you have to listen to the whole episode on Spotify or a good portion of it, scroll down. You see that 5 stars, just go ahead and click on that, because believe it or not, it helps us with the metrics. Our podcast gets better visibility, and I don't make money off of the podcast. It's not, oh God, wouldn't it be nice, sis? Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, we're not.
But it's not necessary. But.
No, it's not necessary. We're just here to help. I'm helping myself, and I get to help other people with, providing them the same information that I'm seeking. So if you like what you heard, please give us a 5-star review. Leave us comments. You could DM us on Instagram at New Mission CT. That's New Mission Charlie Tango. Or, always looking for feedback. You can email us at newmissionct@gmail.com. And I promise we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So, transitioning service members, if you're preparing for your own transition, know that I'm right there with you. I might even be 6 months, maybe just 15 months behind you, depending upon where you're at. So as you're preparing, know that I'm right there with you. Until next time, stay focused.